depends. I mean, if you make the yogurt yourself from scratch, probably, but most of the time, most yogurts are full of sugar these days, particularly if they're low fat. And the cultures are pretty useless, monoculture. You know, they're not high bacterial levels. So you do get what you pay for. I mean, good probiotics, you know, good probiotics should always live in the fridge. If it's shelf stable, you probably find it's full of yeast, which is, you know, yeast can be a probiotic, but it can also be an antagonist. So yeah, they should be fresh, frozen, freeze-dried, refrigerated or frozen, is the way that we find them. Let me have a quick look yet. I still this one's though, I can't remember. Oh yeah, it's got a bit of stuff in it. Have a quick look at this one. This might double up a bit, so I'll flick through it at the stuff that we've already touched on. This just brings us back to the early stages, as we mentioned there. So the records of canids and felids dating back 38 million years. That's their evolutionary point where they started to diverge off as carnivores. This might be a little out of date because there is some fossil records suggesting that Australian Aboriginals were mucking around with dingoes about 40,000 years ago. But the most obvious ones are cave paintings where there's images of dogs and cavemen living together. It dates back about 8,500 years. When did we start cooking for dogs? Not until the 20th century, basically, post Louis Pasteur, who discovered bacteria, and the world then focused on bacteria as being bad, to the point where, I mean, even my father's a surgeon, and he says he can remember back when he first graduated and went into surgery that they used to be removing 3 or 4 feet of large bowel in people because they had bacteria in it. Bacteria were bad, so you removed that diseased part of the body. And it took a little while for them to learn that that was actually perfectly normal to be full of bacteria, and you didn't have to remove that big large section of bowel. So, you know, even Pasteur in his own deathbed, his greatest statement was, what was it? It was in French, but basically I think it was something to do with the importance of the milieu interieur, which basically said it's not actually the bacteria, it's the environment of the body that dictates whether the bacteria are pathological or not. So for a long time now, though. So that drove us to basically start cooking and sterilising food. We were pretty lucky in Australia. The foods didn't hit our market until 1965. First dog biscuit was invented in the early 1800s on a wharf in America, where they had a huge load of, it was wheat or flour that had got infested with weevils, and they thought, what can we do with this? Had some bone meal, put it together, make dog biscuits. And that's how we invented dog biscuits. Certainly not an attempt to make, you know, better, healthier food. And if you've been around long enough, you'll remember that, you know, these products were then pushed very strongly on TV in Australia. You know, no refrigeration. It was basically tins of Pal when they first came out. Dry food sort of came second, but tins of Pal, lots of advertising. Vets recommended it. Remember those days? And vets recommended Pal, and top breeders recommended Pal. Doesn't happen much anymore, but now top vets will recommend another brand of dog food instead. So what did we create? These wonderful products, which I call milk dog food. And simply because, to put it in context, you know, it's fast, it's convenient, you know, go in, grab your food, feed the dog. They tell you it's fully balanced. Well, McDonald's tells you that their food is fully balanced too. It's got a nutritional profile proving. But some poor sucker who decided to live on it for 4 or 6 weeks when he McFatted himself proved fairly quickly that it can also kill you extremely quickly. So, you know, you've got to look at the principle of this. You know, it's come a long way. I mean, this sort of stuff was back in the 80s. You know, pet food went through a pretty dark era, I think, in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, and then it improved dramatically with the onset of some of the newer products that we have out now. But we also need to remind ourselves that each one of those companies that started out with a good intention has been bought out by a multinational. So what do multinationals do when they buy a product? They've got shareholders, they've got a bottom line. What's the easiest way to increase your profit margin? I tell you, I've had a manager ask me the same thing. Can't we remove something? Can't that really expensive barley grass you put in there? It's $12 a kilo. Why do you put that in? Because it's really important for the dog. But can't we remove it? You know, we make all that money. It's kind of, that's the pressure that comes for any business when it comes to making a product. How can you cheapen your product or make more profit? So unfortunately, you know, the UQIVM that came out in 1993 in Australia is not the same as UQIVM that's on sale now. If you look at some of the primary ingredients, even in some of the bigger brands, you know, they used to start with at least meat meal. Some of them now start with a carbohydrate or chicken feathers. Chicken feathers. Yeah, so anyway, I won't go on too much. Reminder, this was my epiphany moment in my practicing career. I was about 4 years into practice, and I was thinking about it. My brother-in-law is a fruitarian, raw food fruitarian. Kind of, at the time, I thought he was pretty weird. He just basically ate everything raw, and he ate a lot of fruit, and he was a healthy-looking guy. And I remember sitting down with him one time discussing dog food and cat food, and he said, "So, you know, why is it? What's with the pellets and the tins? You know?" He says, "Dogs are like." He worked on the principle he was a big gorilla, just a more evolved species, but should be eating his food raw. And he said, "So dogs and cats obviously don't cook their food," and it's kind of like, shit, no, they don't. And then I started thinking about it more, and I thought, actually, there's only one species on the planet that cooks their food: humans. We harness fire, we use it to preserve food, we use it to sterilise food, but is it a good thing? Is it actually, you know, a benefit? So that was, as I said, a big moment for me, because I realised that dogs and cats don't cook. So therefore there is no evolutionary process by which these animals have evolved in 40 or 50 years to be able to process and harness nutrition. You can start with a great bowl of excellent ingredients, but when you put it in through an extruding machine, and you put it into an oven and you bake it at 260 degrees, which is what is a requirement for importing any food into Australia. I'll give you a tip: if you want to use a less cooked food by an Australian brand, you know, what nutritional value is left after 260 degrees core temperature heating? I mean, that's wickedly hot. Yeah, so I think we've done this one. Sorry, I'll just flip through that. Again, just reminding ourselves, you know, why do we think cooked and processed foods are better? Well, it's been rammed down our throats by our own profession, who, you know, adopted it wholeheartedly. I keep saying it's common sense. You know, this is how cats are meant to eat. This is how dogs are meant to eat. Do you have to be a scientist? And I think it's, as a scientist, sometimes we're blinded to the truth simply because we have to accept what is the currently accepted paradigm at the time, which is processed food is great because my lecturers told me that. The university sponsored by XYZ, and you know, that's the way it is. I came out thinking UQIVM was great. I used to tell people it's the Rolls Royce of dog foods. You know, if you want to feed a Holden, that's fine, keep going. But if you want Rolls Royce, you've got to feed UQIVM. It took me a little while to see the end result of that. Yeah, good question here. You send your big bags UQIVM at the zoo? Answer is no. I mean, I went to the Melbourne Zoo, I've been to the Sydney Zoo, I've been in feeding the lions, and they are all fed fresh raw meat. Why is that? Because that's what keeps them healthy. Simple. I mean, they've tried feeding processed diets and the animals suffer. They don't have the same health, and you don't want to go to the zoo and see the animals all mangy and scratchy and itchy and looking miserable. You want them to be, you know, big tough lions. So there's a reality. I mean, that's simple basis. They look at the animal in the wild. What does it eat in the wild? Let's try and feed that. In Australia, it's mainly kangaroo because that's what's available. But the reality is that they are still fed that. How long does a wolf live? I asked the question because some people have some pretty different ideas on this one. The reality is wolves can live up to 20 years in the wild. There's a lot of reasons they don't, but that's their longevity level. You know, if we look at a common domestic malamute, any suggestions on how long we think they're going to live for?
12 at worst.
Yep, 12 at worst. That's probably bad by the time they're 12. So the reality is that there is a longevity gene in canines that we're not seeing clearly expressed, and I think it's being basically suppressed by processed food. Throw a little bit of science on there. So why is cooking bad? Well, we all understand that if you heat protein, you denature it. So when you denature protein, you render it different, changed. You know, its molecular structure has been altered. All vitamins are made of protein. So basically when you denature protein, you destroy vitamins. So what you start with in the bowl, unfortunately when you heat it, is then damaged. And then in pet food, unfortunately, you then have to add back synthetic vitamins and minerals to reverse that damage. Heating destroys omega-3 essential fatty acids. That's something that we all understand now. Again, back when I first started talking about omega-3 fatty acids, no one had even heard of an essential fatty acid. They just weren't even on the radar. And I thought I'd discovered the missing link in fixing dogs because all they did at the start was give them flaxseed oil and half of them got better, and I thought, oh, this is easy. The other half didn't get better, so I figured out there was more to it than that. But that was a big step because obviously processed dog foods, when they're cooked, they can't have an omega-3 level that's still available to them. Decreases digestibility. It's harder to digest a big cooked food than it is raw food, pure and simple, because of the lack of enzymes. It takes longer. It takes about 9 to 10 hours for a raw food to go in one end and become fecal matter at the other end. Most dry foods you'll find it's about 18 hours. They've done some fecal marker testing to prove that. Sterilises food, big one. You know, that's why we cook it. Make it sterile, put it in a bag, it doesn't go off. But the more we learn about how important probiotics are, the more we realise that sterilising food is a negative, not a positive. It's not what we should be doing. When animals eat raw food, it's loaded with bacteria, it's loaded with stuff. You know, but if they have that nice acidic pH, that will kill off the Clostridia and the Salmonella, and the nice healthy bugs will transition on through. So that's how you get your natural probiotic, is by feeding a diet that hasn't gone through a sterilisation process. Lowers bioavailability. Basically that means that what you start with and what you end with are very different. So you can go in with all the right ingredients, but some of these become rendered in basically unavailable to the body. There's a thing called phytate binding that happens with zinc. It's very common. When you use plant-based protein, which happens a lot in pet food, it binds up zinc. So even though the packet will tell you it's got X amount of zinc, that zinc is not bioavailable.